My fellow peasants, how you all doing? Hobo hair peasant checking in. Now let's talk about graphics, baby. I've wanted to do this video for a while now, and I really want this isn't a rant video, this isn't a hate video, this is some genuine concerns, not even just for Final Fantasy 15. I'm going to talk about 15 a lot in this, but this is for the Final Fantasy franchise as a whole, because at this juncture, guys, I have a lot of concerns about where this franchise is going, especially after a few quotes that have come out of late from the final product I saw. And I just want to see if you guys agree with my opinions. And I would really like Square Enix to see this video more than any of the other videos I've done in the past. I've said I'd like to see this, things about Versus 13 and what I would like in the story for DLC in 15. But this is far more than that. This is above all of that. So I'm going to kick off by saying about Final Fantasy 15's graphics. Was it a good looking game? Yes. There's no fewing it. It was a beautiful game. And this is come from someone who appreciates graphical detail. When I play a game, any Final Fantasy, I'll always go around, I'll look at the detail, I'll look at the grass, I'll stand looking at a bush for 5 minutes, see how the shadow effect goes over it, I'll look at the plastic on a stool or a chair, I'll look at an umbrella, so I have an appreciation for it. Despite me saying Final Fantasy 15 looked good, did it look as good as it should have? Considering how much time, effort and resource went into getting that game looking how it was? No, not even close. Not even remotely close, guys, and this is the biggest concern I have. For anyone who doesn't know, which I'm sure we all do, Final Fantasy 15, its biggest issue was the Luminous engine. The Luminous engine was an absolute pig. That's the reason we got the delay. That's why more or less everything that happened negatively in this game, so all the huge cutscene cuts, all the cinematic cuts. I've also talked about how areas were cut, like Tenebrae dungeons, or Tissia dungeons, all speculative rumours, but ones you can really believe, and why they really had to trim this game down. The tech team was spread so thin, trying to work through issues at the same time they were trying to develop this game, that they really were spread thin. And Tabata, while he's trying to take a mess of a product, and when I say mess, I mean a game that had its storyline split over a trilogy, Tabata comes aboard, he needs to condense it, and at the same time he's trying to do all this, trying to build a story from the ground up again, trying to redesign and reinvent it. He's also having to deal with monumental tech issues. Now, I want to be specific. Before I go on the attack of the Luminous engine, I want to first defend it. So, the Luminous engine is a phenomenal engine. You know, just going into some of the details again, I've talked about it in the past, and I'm going to have to compare this to FF13. Okay, so I don't give a shit what you think about this game, about the 13 trilogy as a whole. This was a stunning game, and it's not even just the visuals, in how tidy and neat it was in everything, but I'll go into more on that in a minute. And the thing is, I'm gonna say, this also had its issues. The Crystal Tools engine had the same kind of story, not as severe as Luminous engine, but it did. Final Fantasy 13 was held back, the tech team was spread thin, Crystal Tools wasn't working at the time. And this is the really frustrating thing, guys, is Square Enix, they keep developing these engines and they're not able to implement them properly. So the reason why I'm going to start by defending Luminous engine against Crystal Tools is, again, 30,000 polygons for an entire FF13 character. Final Fantasy 15 character, 30,000 polygons just for the hair alone. And the thing is, that's not even a fraction of the Luminous engine's full potential. So Agni's philosophy was the tech demo that really showcased the full potential of the Luminous engine. And this is insane, guys. So remember the figures, 30,000 full character in FF13, 30,000 just for hair alone. Agni as a character, 11 million polygons, and that split between Agni's different features. 6 million was on her hair, 2 million was just on the feathers on her dress alone, and 3 million was for the rest of the body and the accessories. Going a bit further, 5 million per second is how much FF15 was pushing. Agni's philosophy, which is Luminous's full potential, 63 million polygons per second. So on that alone, you can see, guys, that Luminous engine, as we saw in FF15, Square Enix's big new engine, the engine that was going to take down the West, it wasn't even using a fifth of its full and true potential. This is what really hurts me to say. If Luminous had been using a fifth of its potential, this game would have looked spectacular, but it wasn't even doing that. Most of its development was only using earlier versions of Luminous. So it was only using 1.4 and 1.5 during most of the development stage. Luminous should be at Luminous 2.0. The hair looked terrible at certain points. It didn't seem fully rendered properly. And this was in the final product. Now I could forgive it back in the trailers. One of the ones that really stuck with me was the World of Wonder trailer. Beautiful trailer. I remember watching that trailer and I would go, holy crap, why haven't they rendered and textured that properly? Especially with some of the ground. I think it was in sort of a swamp area. Man, this camera is so dark. Forgive how dark it is, but yeah, some of that ground would genuinely look rubbery, untextured, and I would be thinking, what the hell is going on? And it is because they were working on very, very inferior versions of Luminous. Then there are other issues like NPCs getting cut down. That happened a lot. Leslalem used to be so much busier, and they had to sweep off a whole load because, and this is the thing guys, it's nothing to do with Luminous. The main issues arise where Square Enix couldn't get Luminous to run with the PS4. It doesn't matter how spectacular that engine is, it doesn't matter how ahead of its time is, if it can't be realized in the final product of a game and shown to the world, it doesn't mean dick. And there is a side to me that sympathizes with Square Enix on this. The West are absolutely slamming it with the engines. They really are. They're creating these phenomenal engines, Frostbite for example, that really do work efficiently. It gets games out. And it used to be that Japan were the ones who could create the engine, and it's really flipped on its head. And at this point Japan are getting scared, and Square Enix have almost admitted that they're competing with the West, and Luminous was going to be their thing that took them down. But looking at this entire battle of engines and using this franchise as a battleground to try to compete, no, that is not the way. Fuck it. Should Square Enix give up the graphics game? I'll put that in the thumbnail title somewhere. Should they give it up? Absolutely yes. Because guys, when it gets to a point, and this was true with Final Fantasy 15, when it gets to a point that prioritizing graphics comes at the expense of storyline, it comes at the expense of more cutscenes, more trailers, more cinematics, sorry. When it gets to that stage, that is what's going to kill this franchise. And that's a real concern. And Square Enix have had so many issues with this in the past that I don't know why they keep up the game. When they say things like, our main priority was keeping the graphics in Final Fantasy 15. Keeping the graphic as beautiful and impressive as possible, because that's the most important thing about Final Fantasy. Oh no guys, no. Oh. There might be some of you who do play Final Fantasy for the graphics, perhaps you do play it for its technology, but I've been around the fan base long enough to know that is not what makes a Final Fantasy. That is not the most important thing, and that is not what us, the majority of fans, want. For you to say that you would happily cut storyline and everything else at the expense of keeping it, keeping it instead of looking like this to this, and this looks fantastic, I'll get more into that in a minute. No, that is not the way. That is when you're going to start losing direction. People play Final Fantasies, it's because of these grand, fully fleshed out, engaging stories. For me personally, it goes storyline, characters, music, world, combat system, graphics. So graphics for me is literally down here. I don't know if you agree with this. What would your order look like? But graphics for me personally, I think for a lot of Final Fantasy fans would come around about here. If you'd have built Final Fantasy 15 on the Crystal Tools engine, a 2010 engine, I mean that's not quite true, Crystal Tools did get refined. Honestly, I don't think you would notice the difference in sales. Not by much at all. Because Crystal Tools looks phenomenal. Yes, it might not be the latest, hottest, hot shit thing, but think if they had used Crystal Tools, an engine that by the time it got to the stage of this was so refined, so workable. Think of how many cutscenes and cinematics we had. Think of how much they could have realised the full potential of FF15's story if they'd have used this engine. If you don't believe me, let's just go ahead and compare them. Because graphics is only one part of what makes the game look phenomenal. And FF15 fell flat in so many areas. I mean, let's just name a few. Not voice acting. The voice acting was fantastic. I retract that statement. The voice acting was brilliant. The lip syncing. I have to say it straight, guys. I have to be honest. The lip syncing was out. Now, I can forgive lip syncing that's out in an open world. So with MMOs and really big, expansive open world games where there's loads of quests and MMOs, NPCs, sorry, and you go up and you talk to them and they give you the little quest and the lips are out of sync. Yeah, I get that. That's fine. But guys, there were cutscenes. legitimate story cutscenes in FF15 where the lip syncing wasn't on point. And considering how few story cutscenes there actually were, the thing is, FF13 didn't have that once. Lip syncing was on point from start to finish, absolutely flawless. Another thing this was absolutely flawless for is it wasn't live. It was all pre-rendered scenes, so they looked on point every single time without fail. I understand the issue you have with FF15 is that you try to make a lot of it live. It just didn't work. So for example, the Naga would land. The Naga in that cave would land and the team would freak out about it and Prompto would go, that thing's ugly. The Naga's over here and Prompto would go, that thing's hideous. And Noctis would be looking over here and Ignis would be looking down at his bloody recipe. And Gladiolus would be just fucking off, I don't know, bench pressing. It didn't work. There were times where the live action would fall over and Corleonis would, he would stutter as he turned, or things would happen that didn't come across, or people would be talking and not actually looking at them. You didn't have that with FF13. Okay, if Hope spoke to Lightning or Sarah spoke to Snow, they'd look at each other, they'd interact, they'd have expressions, and with FF15 that didn't happen in a lot of places. The hair in Final Fantasy 15, there were times where 30,000 polygons in that hair, beautiful, but because they had to trim it back and because they worked on the 1.4 and 1.5 versions of the engine, you could really see at times that hair. There was especially one with Arden where he turned around at that time and you looked at his hair and oh, now I know I'm being nitpicky here, guys, but the reason I'm saying all of this isn't to say FF15 looked shit, it looked fantastic, but those are just a number of things that make a game look eye candy, pleasing on the eye. And when you have little things out of place like that, it doesn't matter how good it looks. To a lot of people, they just go, oh, this game is ugly. Another thing is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I strongly believe in this, guys. FF13, to a lot of people, will look better because it has a hyper exaggerated color palette. It really does. It looked genuinely breathtaking, and that's because the color was just so unnatural. Now, I understand, and I like that in Final Fantasy 15, they didn't have that, because this is a fantasy based in reality, so a lot of the color palettes for this were very toned down, very matte. We spent most of our time in Dusk Sky, so most of it was just browns, yellows and very standard natural greens. Talking of graphics aside, how many of the fans actually give a shit? I certainly do. I know most of you hardcore fans probably do, but I've legitimately seen 4 friends play this game, the 13 trilogy. One of those is including my girlfriend, so 3 friends we'll say, and they would walk down they would walk down the beautiful tunnels, or they'd walk along a cliff face and they'd have their camera panned at the ground, or they just have it panned straight ahead. And they would walk past a cliff that I remember looking at, and they had all this scenery and all these shards and details and this this horizon with a river and a forest. They didn't look at it. I watch playthroughs online and they don't actually look around the world. They don't appreciate it. There are people that aren't even looking at your worlds, to be honest. I'm going to say most of them aren't Square Enix. And the thing is, when you're doing all of this, when you are cutting storyline, when you are spending millions on resources, jeopardizing the reputation of your company for something that a lot of fans aren't even going to be really paying attention to, you have to really start questioning, is this the path you want to go on? Because you know what the fans will pay attention to? They'll pay attention to the story. They'll pay attention to, why did Ravus do this? Who is Vestel? Who is Prompto? Why did that just happen? Have you really just off-screened Iodolus and Prina? Give it up, Square Enix. Stop trying to make Final Fantasy the next hottest shit. Stop creating these engines. Because that's the thing, guys, they created Crystal Tools as well. They created Crystal Tools, they had the same issues, they worked really damn hard on Crystal Tools for many years, and they only just about got it right in time for FF13. What's phenomenal about this is how the cutscenes flowed. I mean, I've talked about the hair, I've talked about the colour palette, I've talked about the lip syncing and the actual on-point interaction. Even things like this. Remember how the cutscenes would flow in Lightning Returns? It would literally be, you'd be fighting Null, and as the fight finished, it would instantly go into the cutscenes. I mean, it would smoothly transition. There would be no loading screen like we had for Final Fantasy 15. You had so much going in Crystal Tools. And they built this damn engine and spent millions in resource on it, and only 4 games ever used it. 3 of them were the FF13 trilogy, and the other one was FF14. What are you doing? You got lucky with FF13. You did it with FF15. Are you going to try it again? Are you going to try it with FF16? Are you going to try it with FF17? Now let's just say, in a fictional fantasy world, in a Final Fantasy world, Square Enix listened to what I just said. Let's say they decided, you know what makes a Final Fantasy great is the storyline of the characters, and we're going to use an older engine, but it's an engine that works. And we're going to absolutely push balls to the walls to make the biggest, most expansive storyline ever made. Are you telling me that's not going to be the best Final Fantasy you've ever seen? Would you sacrifice a game that had 30,000 polygons in the fucking hair that half the time don't get actually realised properly, yeah, for a game that had 30,000 polygons for the full character? Yes, this is lesser, but tell me this doesn't look good. Tell me this doesn't look incredible. To the naked eye, most people can't even tell. To the average vapid, zombie-like, Cheetos round the face gamer who's just playing in just an absolute oblivious box of not even looking around, these games don't even look barely any different. But like I've said, guys, they don't look for the graphical detail. So what are you doing, Square Enix? Just give it up. It's long been shown now that you can't create an engine for shit. It's been happening for 6 years now. And Luminous isn't going to be getting any better anytime soon. And even if it does, even if you do somehow get Luminous engine to work, what are you going to do? Create one more game, 2 more games of Luminous, and then what, you're going to move on to the next one as well? This isn't the direction I want Final Fantasy to go in. And think about the development times going forward. You think that Final Fantasy 15 was bad? No, Final Fantasy 15 didn't have 10 years in development. It realistically had 3. And that was at an absolute push. Realistically, 4 to 5 years. So if they carry on this trend, is that what you want, guys? A Final Fantasy every 4 to 5 years? No, what happened to days where we'd get a Final Fantasy every 1 or 2 years? Do you not want those days back? And that's why I need to ask you guys, is this the direction? This video really is me just casting a net out and seeing if I'm isolated in this thought. I've not really discussed it much with anyone. Is this not the direction you also would like it to go? Do you agree with me here? Let's say a trailer for FF16 came out. Let's just say it did look like this. A 2010 very beautiful game. How would you react if you saw that? And Versus 13, even if it came out now. I mean, look at it. If that game came out with how that looked, that still looks great. Look at this Leviathan scene. This is optimal enough. This isn't coming from someone who doesn't appreciate or like graphics. But if I could sacrifice all of that for one more Final Fantasy that was huge and expansive and left me that feeling like after FF7 left me, where it was just holy crap, we did so much in this game. I didn't have that in 15. I liked it, but I didn't have that feeling. FF7, we went into space, we went under the sea, we traversed about 4 mountains. I mean, really think about all the places we went. Wutai, we went to reactors, we went to Golden Saucer, we went to Mount Coral. I mean, the Midgar. I remember when I was in Midgar, I was in there for about 20 hours when I was younger, and as we were leaving Midgar, when we was coming down the road, I generally thought the game was coming to an end. And I found out that there was an entire world with, I was barely even a fraction done. I hadn't even done about 5% of the game. That feeling, I had that on so many other games. I had that on 6, I even had that on 10, I even had that on the 13 trilogy. Square Enix, please realise what makes a Final Fantasy great. Please realise that graphics is not the most important thing. Let me know, guys. Until the next video! Coop out. 2 to the 1, from the 1 to the 3. I like good pussy and I like good trees. Smoke so much weed you wouldn't believe, and I get more ass than a toilet seat. 3 to the 1, from the 1 to the 3. I met a bad bitch last night on the deep. Let me tell you how I made her leave with me. Conversation and NC. I've been to the motherfucking mountaintop. Heard motherfuckers talk, seen them drop. If I ain't got a weapon, I'ma pick up a rock. And when I bust your ass, I'm gonna continue to rock. Get your ass on the wall.